Hi everyone, before this video gets started, I have a couple of quick announcements. First off, I just opened up a Discord server that is available to anyone who donates to my Patreon. Even if it's just $1, you have access to the server and I would love you forever. Secondly, if you live in or around the Chicagoland area, I'll be attending ASEN this weekend. Look for me at the Artist Alley. I'll be there all weekend from open till close, selling posters, pins, commissions, and admiring all the wonderful cosplays that walk by. Come see me there. Okay, enough self-advertising, let's get on with the video. Welcome everyone to a new segment I'm going to call Scene Not Found, where I take a look at some scenes, concept, and characters that didn't make it into their finished film. By examining those scenes, we'll also try to look at why it might have been cut, or what cutting that concept meant for the film as a whole. Today I'll be looking at a deleted scene from The Incredibles.
What did you take? The silver? My grandmother gave that to me. That grandma! What big teeth she has! Syndrome. Don't act surprised, Incredible. I mean, Mr. Smith. You didn't really think that getting a new life would absolve you of the last one, did you? You had to know I'd be back to settle accounts. And the best part is, they don't even know I've escaped yet. You'll be back inside before they do.
Brad Bird's The Incredibles is one of my favorite movies of all time. It was another home run in Pixar's impressive resume at the time, and I think it stands out as one of Pixar's best films. Everything in The Incredibles just works, and the character development and storytelling techniques being shown off here are prime examples that anyone interested in storytelling should study. The Incredibles is also extremely long for an animated film, with a runtime of 1 hour and 56 minutes, just short of 2 hours, and it doesn't feel that long. Thanks to the story being polished over and over again during production to try and cut down some of that running time, The Incredibles is meticulous in making sure that all the fat has been trimmed, that everything you see in the final product is important. The Incredibles doesn't mess around or waste your time. The filmmakers asked themselves again and again, what is our movie trying to say? Does this advance the plot or the characters? Can we accomplish this in a better way? And the film is all the better for it. Pardon the redundancy here, but The Incredibles is just incredible. Incredibles had a very supportive and hardworking team, but also had a lot of ambition even for its time and faced many challenges getting its story down to an acceptable length. Incredibles also marked the first time Pixar used a mostly human cast, and for good reason, since humans were seen as extremely difficult to render in 3D. Humans have hair that need to be simulated, clothes that need to believably lay on the human figure and react to their movements, and have to be designed carefully to be both appealing and not so textured and realistic that they sit in the uncanny valley. This is why up to this point, Pixar was wise and had movies with toys, bugs, monsters, and fish as their leads instead of people. Humans weren't the only gigantic hurdle this movie had to tackle either. Explosions, water effects, hair, clothes, and skin getting wet or being underwater, huge forested areas, rigs that needed to be able to stretch, bend, flatten, and the list goes on and on. Not to mention the huge volume of different environments and backgrounds this film had. Each new environment needing a team of people who modeled, textured, and lit each shot, some of which are only featured in the movie for a few seconds and then never seen again.
Finding Nemo, I think there were roughly 22 sets. In this film, there's over 130 sets and 180 something lighting setups.
So I'll reiterate, The Incredibles is incredible. It didn't just start off this way though. Like all films, the story is formed over years of rewrites and edits. So today we're going to be looking at one of those deleted scenes and discussing why this scene was changed for the final film. I'm going to be looking at The Incredibles' alternate opening, and while the other deleted scenes have a lot to them and plenty to talk about, I'm going to cover this one first. Maybe in a future episode we can talk about the others. This scene can be found on most Blu-ray or DVD bonus features of the movie, or you could alternatively search in YouTube by typing in Incredibles alternate opening. Hopefully it'll be there. So, if you can, I highly recommend for you to go watch it for yourself and then come back here. But I'll be doing my best to explain it for those who haven't seen it or can't be bothered to go look it up. Before we begin, I want to say that it's interesting how watching the deleted scenes from The Incredibles can give you a sense of how this film slowly morphed from its rocky beginning ideas to actually nailing these concepts when the final film came out. Take this opener, for example. How you open a film says a lot about your movie. It sets the stage and has to make a good first impression on the audience. A lot of movies attempt to do this with a bang, something big and showy, especially in a superhero film, where audiences expect a lot of high action, explosions, and fight choreography. But it's impressive to see that even in this rough pass at The Incredibles opener, that the film still had a strong focus on the mundane versus the extraordinary part of superheroes' lives. And yes, I say rough pass because if you were to give this opening even one watch through, it's easy to tell that this was written back when The Incredibles script was completely different. It obviously wouldn't work at all as a replacement to the opening The Incredibles ended up with, which I think is a good thing, because the opening Incredibles ended up with is near flawless in execution. This opening did a lot of things right though, and it probably set the grounds for many, if not all, rewrites that followed. So many elements from this deleted scene were still worked into the final script. It's so impressive that I'm not surprised when I see people comment after seeing it, saying, "Wow, I really like this opening more than the final movie. I wish they had gone this direction instead." Because while I disagree with those comments, I totally see where they're coming from. The alternate opening has a slow build. It starts with Helen and Bob as they're at a cookout welcoming them into the neighborhood. All the neighbors there are schmoozing and chatting Bob and Helen up. It's a clever way for the writers to throw in exposition about our characters. They're introducing themselves to the neighborhood and, by extension, us. But of course, something is different about Bob and Helen. There's plenty of little hints to the audience that they're hiding something, so this builds audience intrigue. Like I said, a lot of clever stuff here. The cookout escalates from the general how-do-you-dos when Bob and Helen are asked about what they do for work. Helen tells a woman that she is currently a homemaker, looking after Violet and taking care of the home. This woman brushes Helen off and is later seen snottily talking about homemakers when Helen snaps at her. This whole bit in the script is said to have come from Brad Bird's personal life when his own wife decided to become a homemaker and how people at parties treated her after that. And as much as I hate to say it, it shows. I appreciate what the writers are trying to say here, that homemaking is just as important as any other job, but this feels more like Helen getting vindication by taking her frustrations out on this poor straw man of a businesswoman. It's not very appealing, and while I'm sure it was well intentioned, I'm not sad to see that this particular part of the early script got cut from later drafts. During the commotion, Bob gets distracted when the businesswoman asks Helen what she used to do for a living, something that she obviously can't say because that would reveal their past as supers, and Bob chops off his fingers, or at least that's what appears to happen. It's a really funny scene as both Bob and Helen need to work off each other to sell the fact that Bob needs to act like his fingers got the axe. But since both of them know that he is perfectly fine, they don't exactly give a convincing performance. It's a great way to show Helen and Bob's chemistry with each other really early on, and watching them tackle this mini-crisis is hilarious and tells us a lot about their relationship. Turns out their poor performance hinted the bad guys off to who they really were though. So the opening then cuts to late at night, and the Parrs are in their home, and here's where the action starts to ramp up. Syndrome attacks the Incredibles in their own home. A lot of elements from the finished film can really be found here, and this idea of a villain attacking the heroes in their own home, a place of safety and security, feels so real and personal. It shows how even in these early stages, Brad Bird and his team knew that they wanted some of their main themes to be about humanizing these larger-than-life supers. Syndrome using Mr. Incredible to destroy his own home, and then the shot where Syndrome walks down the hallway with Helen and Bob floating helplessly as he makes his way to Violet's crib is so chilling. This invasion of the home is actually even stronger in many ways than in the final script, where Syndrome is instead invading their home as a final act of desperation on his part, rather than the total control of the situation he displays here. This was from an earlier version of the script, like I mentioned, and it's sad to see it go, but it was probably for the better. It's easy to look at one scene like this and say, "Ooh, I wish they went this direction with the movie instead." But it's hard to say how the rest of that script flowed, and obviously if the team ended up changing it, they probably changed it for the better. And for the record, let's go ahead and compare it to the final film's opening. The Incredibles opening is pretty lengthy, but it sets up so many plot threads seamlessly. It starts with our heroes doing something very unsuper, answering interview questions. Like the alternate opening, the interview plays with the audience expectations by starting off with something very casual and mundane. The answers each superhero gives to the interviewer are also very telling. Bob wants to settle down and have kids, Helen wants to stay at the top of her game and be a strong woman role model, and Frozone acts the part of a huge ladies' man. But when we see all these characters years later, they've sort of settled for the opposite. And in a movie about superhuman people being forced into hiding what makes them so special in the first place by society, and them all coming to terms with that in their own ways, this interview sets up all three of these characters' arcs perfectly in less than a minute. It tells the audience who these characters are and what they want right away, only to be thrown for a loop when the exact opposite happens. And yeah, you can argue that these interviews are a bit on the nose for getting these characters across, but it still makes perfect sense for the universe they live in for this to be taking place, and yet again accomplishes so much in so little time. And when you factor in that this animated film is almost 2 hours long, it's this movie's way of telling you to strap in, folks, because that was just the tip of the iceberg, and we've got a lot more story to get through, and we can't just dawdle on these important details. This is what you need to know about these characters, okay? Got it? It's showtime. And then, bam, we get thrown into the life of Bob Parr, aka Mr. Incredible. And there's a billion and one praises I could throw at this sequence and the rest of the following movie, to be frank. The way the past is all lit in this golden light, contrasted to the dull, boring, unsaturated colors of Bob's office years later, how Buddy is introduced to the story as a gag amid a plethora of other gags to help conceal his identity as Syndrome later in the film, how this is all taking place in one day that just so happens to be the day of Helen and Bob's wedding, and I could go on and on. But all of this fantastic storytelling had to be worked on, processed, thought over, changed and cut and put back together again. Sometimes this leads to a story becoming only a fragment of its former self, a Frankenstein's monster of the original idea. But in The Incredibles' case, it worked. And it worked because the team never lost sight of their themes and their goal. So, when you have your own stories you're trying to tell, remember this, and ask yourself what your message is. How is the best way to display that message, and be open to making changes and cuts. You might surprise yourself with how much better your story is without a certain element that you thought was irreplaceable before. Or maybe you'll find that a story beat you love works better in a different spot than you originally imagined. Don't be afraid to polish, and don't shy from change. I'm Simi, and I look forward to the start of this series. Let me know what you thought below, and be sure to leave suggestions for other deleted scenes, characters, songs, etc. Anything that you think I should check out. Yet again, a big shout out to all my Patreon supporters. Your donations and feedback help make these videos possible, and I'll just remind everyone again that there is now a Discord server open to talk to me and my other Patreons if you donate. Other rewards include getting art from me, access to special live streams where I'll take requests from you guys, and sneak peeks on what I'm working on. Another reminder that I'll be at ASEN this weekend, selling at Artist Alley, so if you're already going or would like to see me, be sure to stop by. I'll have all kinds of merch available for purchase, and I'll be open for commissions. If you can't make it to ASEN, I do have a Redbubble store where you can buy prints and stickers, links below. Have a fantastic day, everyone!